His voice was barely a whisper, hoarse, cracked, trembling. May I, may I have your leftovers, ma'am? He stood beyond the velvet rope of the cafe patio, cradling a crying baby, clothes soaked with exhaustion. She glanced up, startled, unsure if she'd misheard. But before anyone could react, his knees buckled. He collapsed to the pavement, still shielding the baby with trembling arms. Plates clattered, gasps erupted. Someone yelled for security. But the woman, Rachel Monroe, billionaire CEO, shot out of her chair. As she knelt beside the man, gently lifting the baby from his chest, a storm of memories shattered through her. You feel like the baby I never got to hold, she whispered. What happens next will leave you breathless. The cafe buzzed with midday chatter, a rhythmic symphony of clinking silverware, steaming cappuccinos, and ambient jazz. At a corner table beneath a sleek white parasol, Rachel Monroe sat alone, skimming through a digital report on her tablet. Her tailored navy blazer hugged her figure, her dark brown hair pulled into a low, elegant knot. She was the image of composure, CEO of Monroe Ventures, youngest tech philanthropist on the Forbes list, and to most utterly untouchable. But beneath the calm surface, Rachel lived with silence, the kind that followed heartbreak too final to articulate. It had been 5 years since the accident, 5 years since flashing lights, twisted metal, and a doctor's voice had informed her she'd survived, but her baby hadn't. Since then, she had built empires and won accolades, but she hadn't once returned to the part of herself that dared to hope. Until that afternoon, a shadow fell across her table. She looked up, her brow furrowing slightly at the figure just beyond the cafe's velvet rope. A man stood there, gaunt and weary, with hollow cheeks and a coat 2 sizes too large hanging from narrow shoulders. Dirt clung to his sleeves, his collar frayed, and in his trembling arms lay a baby wrapped in a worn pink blanket. May I have your leftovers, ma'am? He asked, voice barely louder than the rustle of leaves. The words struck her like a gust of cold wind. The man's eyes, tired, pleading, but fiercely protective, never left hers. Then the baby whimpered, a tiny sound of hunger and cold. Her lips trembled, cheeks flushed from the wind. Rachel's hand froze midair, her fork suspended above her untouched salad. She blinked, unsure if she'd imagined it. But before anyone could react, the man's legs gave out. He collapsed to the pavement, curling instinctively around the baby, as if shielding her from a world that no longer noticed them. Gasps erupted, silverware clattered. A waiter shouted for security. Rachel didn't think. She moved. Her heels clicked once, then twice before she dropped to her knees beside him. Her hands shook as she reached out. Can I hold her? She whispered. The man gave a faint nod, eyelids fluttering closed. Rachel's fingers, usually steady behind boardroom tables and investor meetings, trembled as she lifted the child from his chest. She was feather-light, warm, real. The scent of baby powder and worn fabric clung to her. Rachel wrapped her arms around the infant, her blazer draping over the tiny frame like armor. The baby let out a soft, tired whimper, then began to settle. And then it happened. The crack in Rachel's soul split wide open. You feel like, she choked, eyes filling, like the baby I never got to hold. For the first time in years, she felt breathless, not from fear or grief, but from something else, something alive, something that said, this moment matters. And everything else faded. The hallway outside the emergency ward smelled of antiseptic and anxiety. Rachel Monroe stood motionless beneath the humming fluorescent lights, arms wrapped tightly around the sleeping baby, now tucked into a fresh hospital blanket. Her eyes stayed fixed on the double doors that had swallowed the stretcher carrying the man. Eli Dawson, they had said, mere minutes ago. She refused to sit, refused water, refused to answer the nurses who whispered, "Are you family?" She didn't know what she was. All she knew was that walking away from this child now would feel like dying a second time. Behind those doors, Eli lay unconscious, exhausted from days without rest, food, or warmth. As monitors beeped steadily beside him, his mind drifted into memories he had tried so long to outrun. 3 years ago, he had been Eli Dawson, third-year med student, specializing in pediatrics. He'd been the one helping to deliver babies, holding them steady under bright lights, reassuring new mothers with a steady hand and hopeful smile. That life felt like a movie reel now, too bright, too distant, too clean. His wife, Alina, had been the center of it all, lively, brilliant, and stubborn in the best way. When she was diagnosed with stage 4 lymphoma at 6 months pregnant, Eli had begged her to start treatment, but she had refused. "I'd rather give our baby a shot at life," she had whispered, her hand resting protectively over her swollen belly, "even if it means I won't have one." She'd made it through the delivery, barely, just long enough to name their daughter, Lily, before the machines flatlined 2 days later. Eli remembered pressing his forehead against hers, crying silently as Lily whimpered in a bassinet nearby, not knowing her mother had just slipped away. After Alina's death, everything crumbled. Medical school bills turned into loan defaults. The hospital job offer was rescinded. Friends drifted. He tried working, odd jobs, night shifts, anything. But caring for a newborn on the streets of New York City was a war no one prepared him for. Every week was survival. Every morning, a prayer that Lily would live through the night. And now, he had collapsed in front of a stranger, in front of the world. No dignity left, just hunger and desperation. When Eli finally woke, he found himself lying beneath thin hospital sheets, a dull ache throbbing behind his eyes. Panic surged. "Lily! Where's Lily?" The door creaked open. Rachel stepped in slowly, still wearing her blazer, her face pale but steady. In her arms, Lily was fast asleep, a pink blanket wrapped snugly around her. "She's okay," Rachel said gently. "She was just cold and dehydrated. They've given her fluids. She's stronger than she looks." Eli's breath shuddered. "Thank you. I didn't mean to scare anyone. She hadn't eaten, and I thought maybe just a few bites. For her." "You don't need to explain," Rachel interrupted softly. He looked away, shame burning behind his eyes. "I shouldn't have come near you. I thought you were someone else. Someone safe." Rachel shifted Lily slightly in her arms, holding the baby closer. "You were desperate, and you protected her. There's no shame in that." They sat in silence, the sterile hum of machines around them. Eli couldn't understand why this woman hadn't just walked away. Rachel finally spoke again. "5 years ago, I was 16 weeks pregnant. A car accident took my baby, and the doctors told me I'd never carry again." Eli turned to her, stunned. "I buried myself in work," she whispered. "Built companies, gave speeches, won awards. But I never stopped feeling hollow, until I held her." She looked down at Lily, whose tiny hand had curled into her blazer lapel, as if claiming her place. Eli blinked through his tears. "You don't even know us." "No," she said, voice steady. "But I know what it means to lose everything, and what it means to suddenly feel like maybe something's come back." The first time Eli Dawson stepped into Rachel Monroe's penthouse, he paused at the door like a man entering a cathedral. The vast windows stretched floor to ceiling, flooding the space with golden light. The furniture was modern but not sterile, every piece carefully placed. It wasn't just expensive, it was intentional, designed to impress. And yet, as Rachel stepped aside to let him in, baby Lily still asleep against her shoulder, there was no trace of ego in her expression. "There's a guest room down the hall," she said gently, gesturing. "You and Lily can rest there tonight, or longer if needed." Eli hesitated, eyes lingering on her. "Why are you doing this?" Rachel didn't flinch. "Because I know what it's like to feel like the world moved on without you. And because when I held your daughter, something in me started breathing again." He nodded, still unsure, but too exhausted to argue. That night, while Eli slept on crisp sheets for the first time in months, Rachel stayed up with Lily. The baby cried around 2 a.m., a thin, whimpering sound that pierced the silence of the penthouse like a violin bow across raw string. Rachel had never soothed a child before, but instinct moved faster than doubt. She rocked Lily gently in her arms, humming softly, bouncing with careful rhythm. She warmed a bottle, Googling how to check the temperature on her wrist, and fed Lily by the dim kitchen light. By morning, she had changed 3 diapers, gotten spit up on her silk robe, and fallen asleep in the rocking chair with Lily tucked against her chest. Eli woke to that sight. Rachel slumped sideways, one arm protectively around his daughter, her hair messy and her breathing slow. His heart swelled and ached at once. He hadn't seen anyone hold Lily like that since Alina. He stepped closer and whispered, "Thank you." Rachel stirred, eyes fluttering open. She looked down at the baby and smiled, then looked up at him, unsure what to say. No words came, but something passed between them, a quiet understanding. In the days that followed, the rhythm of their lives slowly shifted. Rachel ordered supplies, diapers, bottles, a crib, blankets, everything a child might need. But beyond the material, she offered something else: presence. When Lily cried in the middle of the night, Rachel was often there before Eli. She was the one who learned how to warm a bottle just right, how to rub Lily's back in slow circles to ease her stomach. She read stories even though Lily didn't understand, and hummed lullabies that weren't quite in tune, but always calmed the baby. Eli remained skeptical at first. He had trusted people before and been left with nothing. But Rachel never pushed. She never asked personal questions unless he offered. She simply stayed, gentle, consistent, quietly showing up. One afternoon, Eli found her lying on the living room rug, Lily curled on her stomach, both of them laughing softly as Rachel made silly faces and animal noises. He leaned against the doorway watching them. A smile crept across his face, a reflex he hadn't felt in years. They never called it anything. Not co-parenting, not friendship, not love. But each evening, they sat together, sometimes talking, sometimes just sharing the silence, as Lily dozed nearby. Rachel, once so defined by her achievements, now found joy in burping techniques and baby giggles. She hadn't known how badly she needed to feel useful again, not in boardrooms or news headlines, but in the smallest, most human way. They became a trio, not quite a couple, not yet a family, but undeniably connected. And for the first time in a long while, none of them felt alone. It began with a single click. A paparazzi photo, grainy, tilted, snapped from across the street, captured Rachel Monroe, billionaire tech mogul, stepping out of her midtown penthouse with a baby nestled against her chest. Behind her walked Eli Dawson, still wearing his tattered coat, looking exhausted but alert. A diaper bag slung awkwardly over his shoulder. The caption beneath the image on the gossip blog read, "Tech Titan's secret baby, mysterious new man and infant in tow." Within hours, the photo went viral. Social media exploded. News outlets speculated wildly. Was Rachel Monroe secretly a mother? Was the man her lover? Her employee? A homeless actor in a publicity stunt? Who was the child? And why was a billionaire carrying her in public with no security, no announcement, and no explanation? Some headlines were cruel. Rachel's redemption play? Is this the new PR baby trend? From power suits to Pampers, what happened to Rachel Monroe? Others praised her. Modern-day angel? CEO opens her home to baby in need. Compassion in corporate clothing. But to Eli, the reaction was terrifying. He found the headlines on Rachel's tablet, which she'd left open on the kitchen counter. His hands trembled as he scrolled. Some posts questioned his intentions, calling him a scammer, a freeloader. Others suggested Rachel was mentally unstable, still grieving her lost child, latching onto a replacement. His jaw tightened. His first instinct was to protect her and Lily from the noise, from himself. That night, he paced the apartment while Rachel rocked Lily to sleep. "We should go," he said finally. His voice was low but firm. Rachel looked up, surprised. "What?" "You've already done more than anyone ever has," he said. "But this could destroy you. Your name, your work, everything you've built." She laid Lily down gently, then turned to face him. "You think I care about any of that?" "You should," he snapped more harshly than intended. "You're Rachel Monroe. You don't need a scandal involving a homeless man and a baby you didn't ask for." Rachel stepped closer, eyes burning not with anger, but conviction. "You think this is a mistake?" "I think I'm a liability." She exhaled sharply, then said, "Then let me deal with it." The next morning, Rachel called her publicist and demanded a press conference. Her board objected. Her legal team begged her to let it blow over quietly. She didn't budge. The room was packed. Dozens of reporters, flashing cameras, live streams. Rachel stepped onto the stage wearing a simple white blouse, no designer jewelry, no branding, just truth. She stood behind the podium and let the room settle. "I know there are questions," she began, "and I'm not here to spin a story. I'm here to tell the truth." She looked directly into the cameras. 5 years ago, I was in a car accident that took the life of my unborn child. I was told I could never have children again. I buried myself in my work, in success, in distractions, until I forgot how to feel anything at all. She paused, breath trembling. 2 weeks ago, a man collapsed in front of me on a sidewalk. In his arms was his daughter, hungry, cold, fragile, but alive. And when I looked into that baby's eyes, I felt something stir that I thought was lost forever. Her voice steadied. "This is not a PR stunt. This is not pity. This is not charity. This is love. This is family. And I will not walk away from that just because the world doesn't understand." There was silence. Then applause, slow, hesitant, but rising. Even some of the harshest critics stood. Backstage, Eli held Lily tightly, and for the first time, he didn't feel like a burden. He felt seen, he felt chosen, and he knew Rachel wasn't rescuing them. She was fighting with them. Rachel didn't make promises lightly, but when she said she would help, she meant every word. Within days of the press conference, she had mobilized her legal team, not to protect her image, but to rebuild Eli's life. Together, they retrieved birth certificates, filed paperwork for guardianship, and recovered documents that proved Eli's past education, including his incomplete medical degree. The hardest part wasn't the paperwork. It was convincing Eli that he still deserved a future. He'd grown used to being invisible, to lowering his gaze, to shrinking in public spaces. But Rachel's unwavering belief in him, spoken not just in words but in actions, began to chip away at the shame he carried. "I called Columbia," she said one evening over dinner. "They still have your student records. With the right support, they're willing to let you return." Eli looked up, stunned. "You didn't have to. I wanted to," she said simply. "Lily deserves to see her father become who he was meant to be." So he did. He went back. It wasn't easy. He studied between diaper changes and late-night feedings. Rachel picked up more responsibilities at home so he could focus. When exams loomed, she took Lily to her office, building a portable crib in the corner of her conference room. They became a team, not just in survival, but in hope. The day of graduation arrived with a crisp breeze and a field of folding chairs arranged under cherry blossoms. Rachel wore a soft blue dress and sat in the front row. Lily nestled on her lap in a tiny floral jumper. Eli's name was called. He stepped onto the stage, wearing a rented gown 2 sizes too big and a smile that couldn't be contained. In his arms, he carried Lily. At the podium, the audience quieted. "A few years ago," he began, voice steady, "I had nothing. I held my baby in my arms and begged a stranger for leftovers. I thought I was asking for food, but she gave us a life." He looked toward Rachel and paused. "She gave us dignity, a roof, safety. But more than that, she gave me back the belief that I still mattered, and that my daughter deserved a father who could stand tall." Tears shimmered across eyes in the crowd. "I'm graduating today not just because I fought my way back, but because someone stood beside me and refused to let go." Rachel blinked hard, her fingers wrapped tighter around Lily's small hand. Eli stepped down to a standing ovation. That night, back at the penthouse, after the applause had faded and Lily had fallen asleep between them on the couch, Rachel looked at Eli and whispered, "You've always been her father, but I'd like to officially be her mother." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned over, kissed Lily's forehead, and said, "We're already a family, Rachel. You made sure of that." And she smiled, not as a CEO, not as a woman defined by loss, but as someone who had helped 2 lives find their way home. Life didn't change with fireworks. It shifted in gentle, almost invisible ways, like light turning slowly from dusk to evening. Eli stayed on after graduation, even though Rachel never asked. He cooked when she worked late. She watched Lily when he needed to study for board exams. They passed bottles, folded laundry, and laughed softly over midnight snacks eaten on the kitchen floor. Their lives weren't grand, but they were shared. Eli learned how Rachel took her coffee, strong, one sugar, always in the blue mug with the chipped handle. Rachel knew the exact way Lily liked her socks folded, and that Eli always kissed her forehead twice before bed. They never discussed what they were. Not friends, not roommates, not quite a couple. But everything they did said family. Then one rainy Thursday, Rachel came home early. Her blazer was draped over one arm, her skin pale and her smile tight with fatigue. "You okay?" Eli asked, rising from the couch with Lily balanced on his hip. "I'm fine," she muttered, but she leaned against the wall just a moment too long before her knees buckled slightly. Eli caught her before she hit the floor. "No arguments," he said gently. "You're going to bed." He tucked her under the covers and brought her water, moved Lily's crib beside her bed. Then he stayed. All night. Rachel drifted in and out of fevered sleep, waking to the soft sound of Eli's voice reading aloud from one of Lily's storybooks, his hand resting lightly on her wrist as if anchoring her back to calm. By dawn, the fever broke. Rachel opened her eyes to find Lily snuggled in the crook of her arm, her tiny body curled between them. Eli sat nearby on the edge of the bed, bleary-eyed but steady. "Did you stay all night?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. He nodded. "Didn't want to leave." Rachel looked down at Lily, whose thumb twitched in her sleep, her cheek nestled against Rachel's heart. "Do you believe—" Rachel started, then hesitated. "Do you believe family needs a title?" Eli's eyes softened. He reached over and laid his hand gently over hers. "As long as there's love," he murmured, "nothing else matters." Rachel exhaled slowly, as if releasing a weight she didn't know she'd been holding. She turned her hand in his, lacing their fingers together. There was no label for what they were, no ceremony, no announcement. But in that small room with a sleeping child between them and the first light of morning brushing the curtains, they were a family, not born from tradition, not bound by law, but forged in trust, in second chances, and in the quiet kind of love that doesn't need to be named to be real. The sun filtered gently through the canopy of trees, casting golden light across the quiet park. The same place where, 1 year earlier, Eli had asked a stranger for her leftovers. Now the benches were decorated with white ribbons. Rows of simple chairs lined the grass. Soft music drifted through the air. Rachel Monroe stood at the edge of the aisle, her dark brown hair loosely curled, falling over the shoulders of a flowing ivory dress. There were no diamonds, no extravagant displays, just grace, warmth, and the glow of a woman who had learned how to breathe again. At the other end of the aisle stood Eli Dawson, eyes shimmering, dressed in a charcoal suit that fit better than anything he'd worn a year ago. In his chest beat a heart steadied not by survival, but by love. And between them toddled Lily, now 2 years old, wobbling slightly in her white shoes, clutching a velvet ring box in her tiny hands. The crowd chuckled softly, some wiping away tears. When Rachel reached him, Eli took both her hands, voice quiet but clear. "You didn't give me scraps," he said. "You gave me everything I thought I had lost. Hope, family, love." Rachel's eyes glistened. She reached up, cupped his cheek, and whispered, "You and Lily brought me back to life." The officiant stepped aside. No grand speeches, no dramatic kiss. Just a soft forehead-to-forehead embrace, and then Eli gathered them both, Rachel and Lily, into his arms. Their love was no longer about healing wounds. It had become something deeper, not rescue, not charity, but something steady, rooted, sacred. A beginning built not from what was broken, but from what was beautifully rebuilt together. In a world where success is often measured by status, wealth, or image, this story reminds us that the most powerful acts of love are often the quietest. A single whisper, "May I have your leftovers?" unlocked a future none of them saw coming. Rachel Monroe didn't need to be a mother. Eli Dawson didn't ask to be rescued. And Lily, so small, so vulnerable, didn't know she would bring two broken hearts back to life. But sometimes family isn't something you're born into. It's something you choose, moment by moment, through compassion, courage, and the willingness to show up when it's uncomfortable. In today's culture, where loneliness often hides behind social media filters and people walk past each other without seeing, this story reminds us that connection is still possible, that kindness still matters, and that healing doesn't always come through grand gestures. It often begins with someone simply saying, "You matter, you belong." So now we turn it over to you. What's your definition of family? Have you ever experienced a moment where a stranger changed your life? Do you believe love without labels can still be real and lasting? We invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective could inspire someone else more than you know. Thank you for listening to this story. If it touched your heart, please give it a thumbs up, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to Warm Soul Stories for more narratives that stir the heart and restore faith in humanity. Because sometimes the smallest moment, a cry for help, a shared meal, a second chance, can rewrite everything. We'll see you in the next story.